Michael Grove is out for the season. Matt Sauer is heading to Japan. So are some others. Should they be going? Who's on the roster? Let's talk about it. Let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. This is the daily podcast covering the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. You can become an everydayer by listening or watching every day. You can make that easier on yourself by subscribing, get notified when our episodes are ready or when we're going live on YouTube. If this is your first time listening or watching, welcome. I'm Samperio, usually joined by Jeff Snyder. Should have been joined by Jeff Snyder, but, things don't always work out that way when there's youth sports tournaments and games and schedules get changed around. So just me, but Jeff and I are both lifelong Dodger fans that have spent over a decade covering the team in a few different ways. We've been doing this podcast here going into our 7th season. So a lot of Dodger talk, a lot of Dodger moments, a lot of Dodger things. And, we're here to talk more Dodgers today. We start off with some news, injury updates from over the weekend. The biggest one is Michael Grove is out for the season. He's undergoing shoulder surgery. Another youngish, Dodgers pitcher that's undergoing surgery that puts them out for at least a year. He joins a long list of those that are already on the 40-man roster for the Dodgers. Ultimately, in terms of loss for the 2025 Dodgers, probably more of a depth piece than anything else. I don't know. Michael Grove maybe would have had a chance to make the opening day roster or travel to Japan just because of the other options from the bullpen that are not going to be ready to go to Japan or not going to be ready for opening day. But ultimately, Michael Grove didn't factor into this Dodger team without some injuries and nothing more than a depth piece. I don't know. This kind of puts him in a tough spot for, himself in terms of coming back. He's already had Tommy John surgery before in his career. He's 28 years old. He's going to be 29 by the time he's able to pitch in the majors again. He still has 3 years of team control for the Dodgers. So, I don't know. This could be the end of Michael Grove's tenure with the Dodgers, maybe, just for the simple fact of at some point they may need a roster spot. Obviously, they can move him to the 60-day IL to get a immediate roster spot on the 40-man, but at some point they might decide, hey, we need this probably more in the next offseason. If depending on what happens, they might need that 40-man roster spot once the 60-day IL is done after the season. So, there's a potential chance that we've seen the last of Michael Grove as a Dodger. Don't want to get too dark into it, but that's just, the reality of the situation, especially with all the other arms that are coming back. And, with Grove, he never really found a spot or a role with the team other than filling in. He was a starter, spot starter, multi-inning reliever. The best and most success he's had was as a 1-inning reliever. Every time they threw him out there for the next inning, it normally didn't go well. But yeah, realistically, his ceiling is probably a number 5 / spot starter or reliever. And for the Dodgers, they might have a lot of those guys, especially when all these guys come back from injury. So we'll see what happens with Grove. It sucks for him. It sucks for the Dodgers system as a whole right now, just the fact that there was so many shoulder and elbow injuries and everything else. And I know they're working on trying to figure that out, whether it's a correlation thing, causation thing. Who really knows? We don't know. They're working on it for sure. But yeah, that's just nature of the beast when it comes to pitching and injuries and everything else. The Dodgers ultimately won't be hurt too much by this. And, Michael Grove probably hurts the most, obviously, of all this. So, but with that, we got the news that a guy that I don't even think we've mentioned on this podcast here is heading to Japan, and that's Matt Sauer. Kind of a interesting way to get notified that he was heading to Japan on the travel roster. He was struggling mightily in an inning in spring training. Dave Roberts came out to get him. Spoke to him real quick before that, and definitely upped his spirits for sure. Matt Sauer is a guy that, like I said, we haven't really talked about. I don't even think it's really been someone on our radar in terms of a roster spot. I don't even really think necessarily he has the greatest chance of being on the roster. I think he may travel, and I think he may pitch in the exhibition games. I read that his mom is from Japan and he wants her to go out there, so maybe he seems like one of those guys, and not to knock it or anything, but it seems like one of those guys that's going to Japan because he is a little bit more expendable, and the Dodgers maybe want to keep some guys here that aren't going to pitch in Japan or that aren't going to factor into the games over there in Japan. So, obviously a big moment for Sauer. I know that the Dodgers, there was an article about him and, kind of how the Dodgers had their whole pitching staff, coaching staff on the Zoom with him when they were trying to get him and, what they wanted him to do and how they felt he could be better. It hasn't necessarily worked out too great in terms of spring results, but also just, ERA and everything else in spring results, not the end of the world. But if you can show that you can still have the strikeout stuff, to kind of figure things out along the way. He has, I think 8 strikeouts and like 7 in a couple of thirds innings or so. Better than maybe he's been before, and maybe there's still something the Dodgers see in him moving forward. But yeah, I think this just kind of feels like, hey, Matt Sauer, you want to travel to Japan? We, aren't going to take certain guys because they're not going to pitch. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. When it comes to the 5th starter spot, we haven't got anything in terms of who it is, but Dave Roberts did mention here on Monday morning that the 5th starter spot in the rotation has been decided. Whoever it is won't travel to Japan. They'll have him continue to work out here in Arizona and, get his innings in. So it might be a process of when we find out someone's going to Japan, okay, they're not the number 5 starter. If they're not going to Japan, they might be the number 5 starter. I'm sure we'll get an answer here in the next couple of days anyways, but definitely something to look forward to. I would imagine it's between Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May, and I got to imagine Tony Gonsolin will get it. And I know Dustin May wanted to start, and I know Dustin May doesn't have any options left, and I know there's maybe some questions of what could happen there. I don't think the Dodgers would be in the market to trade Dustin May at the moment. They need the as many arms as they can possibly have at the moment. It could come a point sometime during the season that it happens, but that's just the way it is. I think Gonsolin will be the number 5 starter. May will be a reliever to start the year. Maybe there's some piggyback options to have, or maybe May is like a guy that pitches twice a week, a couple innings at a time. We'll have to wait and see there what happens, but that's kind of where the roster sits in the pitching side. We haven't really heard too much else. Blake Snell will travel to Japan, won't pitch in any of the games that matter over there. Blake Snell was unofficially kind of named the domestic day opening starter. Dave Roberts couldn't officially say it, but he did basically say it in not so many words. And yeah, that makes the most sense for the Dodgers. I would imagine they might have Yamamoto game 2, Glasnow game 3, maybe Roki game 4, and then whoever's pitching in the number 5 spot, obviously in the next spot. So the Dodgers, it's a pretty strong, formidable staff. If Roki Sasaki might be your number 4 pitcher, or Tyler Glasnow might be your number 4 pitcher, depending how they go on order, whatever the case is. But yeah, that's kind of the pitching side of things. It's looking as good as it can be in terms of with all the injuries and everything else. We're going to switch sides to the offensive side for the next segment or so, and look at who has already been informed they're traveling to Japan, who could be on the opening day roster, who could be a starter, since the Dodgers are still looking for starters at some positions. So that's what we're going to get into next. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the net. Brackets are things of the past. Betting on the March Madness tournament is where it's at now because you got to stay in on the action. If your bracket gets busted after the first weekend, guess what? You don't have to worry about that with FanDuel because you can keep getting in on the action beyond that all the way up until the championship game. And it's all on the FanDuel app, which is simple to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. So go to FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers. Might be your first listen of the day, might be your second listen of the day, might be any listen of your day, but we appreciate you for being here with us. We appreciate you if you're an everydayer. That's just someone that listens or watches every day. And if you're on YouTube already, make sure you can check out Locked On Sports Day and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing the biggest news and stories from the sports world and the LA sports world. All right, let's talk about James Outman a little bit. There was an update from Fabian Ardaya once again here on Monday morning that James Outman will be traveling to Japan. He will be on that travel roster. It says his status for the active roster is still TBD. I mean, I can't imagine James Outman has shown much of anything to be on the active roster. The Dodgers aren't dealing with any injuries that we know of in terms of getting him on the active roster. But I guess when you're right at this point, what you're getting down to is, the lesser of evils to a certain extent. Like there was a report that Haesung Kim, they haven't decided if he's traveling to Tokyo yet. They haven't decided what his roster status is going to be, whether it's starting the year in the minors, whether it's starting the year in Arizona, just working out the facility, working on his new swing. But I would imagine that essentially takes him out of any consideration to start the year in the majors. James Outman is in a spot with David Bodie and Chris Taylor kind of for that final spot at the moment, or, Andy Pajes in that mix as well. Yeah, I think for Outman traveling, I wouldn't read into it too much in terms of roster stuff. I think you're taking 31 guys. You need guys to play in the exhibition games, and James Outman's one of those guys. But Dave Roberts did talk about Outman and his swing and the fact that he struck out, so many times. I think it was 12 times in his first 23 at-bats. And Dave Roberts said, quote, early on, he looked really comfortable with kind of a little revamped swing. Right now, he's swinging and missing a lot. I don't know if he's pressing. He just doesn't look as comfortable. And, yeah, when someone doesn't look comfortable with their swing, having them on, the active roster when you're probably not going to play too often is not the best way. If James Outman's going to fix the swing, it's going to be in AAA against pitching, playing every day. And that's the way, it would work out. But, the Dodgers don't necessarily have a true center fielder on the roster, which is probably the main reason that's keeping them in consideration. Tommy Edman can play center field, but he's better in the infield. Andy Pajes can play center field, but not particularly well. Kike, Chris Taylor, all those guys can play center field, but they're not necessarily someone whose bats are going to be in the everyday lineup. I mean, Dave Roberts pretty much said Kike won't be an everyday guy at one spot just because of his versatility. So, I would imagine he's going to play all over. So, where does that leave Outman? And like I said, for me, it's one of those where he's a man that can play center field. He's not really bringing anything with the bat. And the thing with him is that he's not. It's kind of interesting. Like James Outman is young in his baseball career in the majors because he's only been in the majors 2 years, but he's not necessarily young in terms of baseball. Like he's 27 years old. He'll turn 28 during the season. it's not a time of, oh, this guy still, has too much time to develop. It might be a matter of this guy is a fourth outfielder that's defensive, primarily there for defense. And that might be something that the Dodgers are considering with him. I'm still of the mindset that Chris Taylor is somehow going to start the season with the Dodgers on the roster. The fact that Outman is traveling maybe points to that might not being true, but it's not like they can take 31 guys, 26 on the roster. They can take 31. I would imagine they're going to take probably 2 to 3 extra pitchers. So, some of these other position players are going to be traveling. And I don't know. I just can't see them having Outman as a guy to start the season in the majors with his swing so out of whack, with him not necessarily having a true role on this team, other than, maybe you can play defense for the last couple innings of some games. Because, I mean, it's not even like he is much of a platoon guy at this point. He can't hit righties or lefties at the moment. And, that's not necessarily the way you want to go. The other way, or the other reason I feel this way, and, we're at the point in spring where guys are starting to play where they're going to play. Guys are starting to maybe bat in the lineup where they're going to bat. And you look at the lineup for Monday's game, James Outman is playing left field and Andy Paz is playing center field. To me, that signals that Paz is going to be the Dodgers' primary center fielder against left-handed pitchers to start the year. I feel like, Kike will probably start against lefties. Or Kike will start. Oh, wait. No. Paez will be the primary center fielder. Kike will get some playing time mixed in there. But, I feel like if Outman was generally being considered for this roster, he'd be playing center field right now because that's where he would play if he does make this Dodger team. He's not going to play left field. That's where Michael Conforto's at. He's not going to play right field. That's where Teoscar Hernandez is at. He bats the same side as Michael Conforto, so it's not like there's any platoon option there in left field. Outman's center field or bust on this team, and if he's not playing center field over Paez in a spring training game this close to the season, then he's probably not going to play center field for the Dodgers in the regular season, or at least not consistently. He, like I said, he might be a guy that just is that fourth outfielder that plays occasionally and comes in for defensive purposes late in the game. And it feels weird to be in this spot based on how the spring has gone and how the offseason has gone, to be at a point where you don't necessarily know who's your guy on March 10th. You don't have a for sure guy at second base or center field. David Bodie's still continuing his hot spring. He's still looking like a guy that is fighting for, that roster spot, that 26 man. But can he hold down a position on defense? We don't know that either. It looks like they maybe want Edman in the infield. He's been playing a lot more infield. He's playing second base on Monday. That's someone that is probably going to be there for the moment, at least until Ha-Seong Kim figures it out. And who knows, maybe, if Ha-Seong Kim starts the year in the minors or working out in Arizona, I mentioned before, maybe that's something that they're going to try to get him to work a little bit more on center field and, kind of figure that out there. But there is 95% certainty on this Dodger roster and 95% certainty of what you're getting on this roster in terms of who's playing where. But that, 5% is where it's been a little bit intriguing. We know the number 5 spot and the rotation is up for grabs. We know there's a couple of bullpen spots up for grabs because of injury on the position player side. I mean, we've talked about all these guys a lot. We've talked about Outman. We've talked about Paez. We've talked about Chris Taylor. We've talked about David Bodie. We've talked about, Kike, but Kike is pretty much a lock on the roster. So there's still a little bit of uncertainty there. And that's kind of what, brings it fun or makes it fun for the spring. Maybe not so fun when you're kind of thinking about what this roster or what this lineup is going to look like. But yeah, I mean, there's still more to come. we'll get a little bit more into some of this position player stuff coming up. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen or any listen of the day. Thank you for being an everydayer if you are one. An everydayer is just someone that listens or watches every day. We appreciate those of you that already are everydayers. If you're not one, we're here for you 5 days a week for 30 minutes a day. It's not too much of a commitment, I would say. So, and baseball's, the season's coming up. Games that matter will be here next week. And, why not want to be up to date and informed on the Dodgers every day? So make sure to do that. And remember, you can always go beyond the podcast, become a Locked On Dodgers Insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. You can get text directly from us, keeping you up to date with our schedule and the Dodgers updates. You can also be invited to a Discord server to talk Dodgers with other Dodger fans that I'm sure will be popping once the season gets going. So make sure to join subtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. All right. Like I said, the Dodgers, the only uncertainty comes from these extra position player spots. We haven't heard much other than, Outman traveling. You would imagine Paz is traveling. You would imagine some of these other guys are traveling. But, we don't know exactly where they're going to play, who's going to be what, who's going to be on the actual active roster, who's not going to be. And, yeah, you look at the ML, you look at stats from the spring, and nobody's, other than David Bodie, nobody's, oh, man, this is somebody that's earning their spot. And that's why it's kind of tough. Bodie, again, is not on the 40-man roster currently. It's very easy to make room for him. They still have some guys that could go on the 60-day IL, Michael Grove being one of them. So, that makes the most sense there. Again, I don't know if they, trust his defense at second base just for the simple fact of, he hasn't played there without the shift. But the Dodgers defensive, like, they move enough guys around to where if you're in, decent enough shape, you're probably going to be okay. You're not going to, make any spectacular plays, but you can get the job done. But yeah, you look at the candidates for some of these things, and there's no, Chris Taylor, nothing. You're looking at James Outman, hasn't done much. You're looking at and even Andy Pajes hasn't done much offensively. I think anything projected from offense from Pajes mostly comes from the fact that he did do it relatively well last year. The fact that he hit lefties pretty consistently throughout the year, even when he was, struggling. And, the fact of the matter that you would hope he gets better. He didn't seem to have any issues recovering from shoulder surgery last year, but another year removed from that could only be better, and that's somebody that can fill a role for sure. But defense is still a thing, and I know I'm on record here as saying that I don't necessarily remember Pajes being terrible in center field. I know there's people that disagree with that, and probably some numbers that disagree with that. And it's hard not to say that the Dodgers, he didn't hit well enough to justify, okay, we're going to play him in one of the more important positions, even though his defense lacks a little bit, and especially pretty hard to knock defense when, we all remember Aaron Judge dropping that ball in center field and that kind of being a catalyst to the Dodgers 5-run inning. And honestly, even in 2023, James Outman missing that ball in center field to start the game against the D-backs and then LDS, not that would have prevented the inning from going the way it had, but it might have helped. Kershaw might have been in a different headspace or whatever the case was. Maybe not, but you never know. So it's hard to knock defense when it comes to that. But yeah, I think that Andy Pajes is built for the corner outfield, but I think, at 24 years old, with the way the Dodgers have to start the season this way. I think that you're fine if he is your guy playing center field a majority of the time against probably left-handed pitching. And if he does struggle, then you have other guys. Kike is not a starter, not going to be a starter, but he can become a starter pretty easily in terms of being strong enough defensively in center, strong enough defensively at second base, and you might lose a little bit of offense, but again, with this offense, your first six guys are seemingly solid, solidified. Seven guys, you count Edman. Edman's not an offensive juggernaut, but we've seen, last year he had a stretch where he had a really hot week with the Dodgers in terms of some power numbers. We saw obviously what happened in the postseason, and he would imagine he's going to continue to get better being with the Dodgers. And you got the top six of Ohtani, Mookie, Freddie, Teo, Muncy, Smith. Even though Smith did struggle last year, still dealing with the ankle injury, that's still somebody that you would imagine is going to give you some above average offensive production. And then you got Edman 7, and you're looking pretty solid right there to where if your last two spots aren't necessarily as strong offensively, you can get away with it. That's not counting Conforto. Conforto has been above league average or above hitting his entire career. So I wouldn't not imagine that to be any different this year. So now you're looking at eight guys that could be at least 3 to 4 guys that are going to be above average offensively. Probably 5. Muncy's in that group. And then you have Will Smith and Tommy Edman, who Smith would be in that top group if it wasn't for the injury that he's dealing with. Edman can be on the top group at times, but ultimately over his career has been, around league average. Like Conforto, again, mostly around league average or above league average. So you're looking at one spot that might struggle. And, that's not necessarily going to hurt you too much. That's not something that you're going to be too worried about for the Dodgers. What they need to be not worried about, but what they would, want to be, concerned is even too strong of a word. I guess aware of is, Pages, defensive ability in center field. James Outman maybe figuring out his swing. Hesson Kim figuring out his swing. Because if you get Hesson Kim back out here in a month and say he's worked on his swing, he's dealt with some velocity in AAA, he comes back out here. Now he's playing maybe second base every day. Edman moves out to center field, or Hesson Kim plays center field and Edman plays second base. It's kind of weird the Dodgers are playing this way with positions up the middle, but that's just the way the roster is kind of gone for them this spring. Things haven't quite worked out. I know there's already been a time, but there's going to be a time more when maybe, they shouldn't have traded Gavin Lux or they shouldn't have done this. But ultimately, everything that was done was just kind of setting up the way they want to set it up. At the very least, Mookie has looked solid at shortstop. Hopefully that continues on into the regular season. We don't have to worry about him defensively. We don't have to worry about them trying to figure things out. We saw, last year we saw Miguel Rojas break down physically from playing so much. But that's if Miguel Rojas is playing second base 3 times a week, and Edman's playing center field those 3 days a week, and then you have Edman playing second base the other days a week, and Pies playing center field, 2 to 3, 4 days a week. Like the Dodgers, will be fine, like because of the rest of the roster foundation and the core that they do have. So there's a lot of question marks still, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen, especially considering we've already gotten a couple, not necessarily surprises, but Matt Sauer. I don't know if anyone would have had us having him travel to Japan. Again, I don't think it's to be on the active roster, but you never know. It could be if they want to leave more guys back, and that's just the way that goes. So. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe and get notified when our episodes are ready. and be up to date with when we're going live or anything of that nature. For that, you can also follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. To be even more up to date than that, you can go beyond the podcast, come Locked On Dodgers Insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. You can get text directly from us, keeping you up to date with Dodger news and rumors and thoughts. And with our schedule, sometimes you can also be invited to a Discord server to continue to talk Dodgers with other Dodger fans that are Locked On Dodgers Insider. So make sure to check that out. If you want to get a hold of us, Jeff's on Twitter as Nightdog. I'm on Twitter at Vincent91. DMs are open there. I know some of you guys are DMing us here and there. If we don't get back to you right away, we'll get back to you eventually or on the show. Like we might just take it straight to the show. You can also send us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or leave us a voicemail. Send us a text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car, if you're at home, text my device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.